Welcome back to Talking with Ted, and we're talking now about wildflowers. And in this series of 4 segments, we will talk about the summer higher elevation wildflowers. We know in Arizona, if you're going to hike cool in the summer, you have to hike high, and you will come across a different range of flowers along the trail, and this will help you identify some of those and get you started. So we're going to talk a little bit about tools and then some tips. Okay, so let's start with the tools. A couple little things. All right, so if you're out there hiking around and you know some of these flowers are little, and just having a hand lens just to magnify a little bit will help you pick out some features that may be mentioned in some of the guides. Okay, so guides. All right. Now tools take many forms. Some are more effective than others. I recently fell on a hike a couple of months ago now and dislocated my shoulder. So when I went to the emergency room, they gave me a tool to help in my recovery. Okay. We know all about tools. We use them all the time in various settings. Okay. So this one, if I get them untangled from my other tool, the emergency room gave me this sling in order to keep my arm from moving around, all right, and to assist in my recovery. Okay, so that makes sense, right? When I went to the orthopedic surgeon, they decided that this would be a better tool to serve as a sling. Okay, so I wore that for a while. Next came a friend. Now Phil thinks that Ted needs a little more help. So he decided to give me some bubble wrap in which to wrap myself, so should I fall again, I won't get hurt and I will bounce. All right, now, not the most effective tool. And we will find that some of these guides are not as effective as others. I also want to point out the round nature of this tool, because that's going to come up in a minute. Okay, we'll get back to that. All right, so then I went to physical therapy for a while, and look what they gave me. These things are to help me with my strength and my range of motion. Okay? Now you notice they're different colors. Why is that? All right, so they have a different thickness so that it's a different amount of strength, and you're supposed to progress as you use them and get in better condition. All right, why are they in different colors? The colors don't mean anything. All right, but a color, like with the flowers, is just a handy, recognizable aspect, but it doesn't mean much with regard to the relationship of the flowers to one another. And did you know that flowers have families, kind of like people do, okay? And what that means is there's a genetic connection with some of these flowers, and the family level of relationship is what will be the best tip for you to start identifying things that you see. If you can eliminate thousands of possibilities by recognizing the rose family, cactus family, grass family, primrose family, carnation family, that will be the single most effective way for you to accurately identify what you're looking at in the field. Okay, so the book, you know, library land, books. Okay, so we're going to include a few images thanks to our friend B.H. Haywood here and his classic text on the flowering families of the world. All right, there'll be an image, and it's going to give you a picture of the overall characteristics of the family. Okay, and again, if you can recognize the family, then you are well on your way to knowing exactly what you're looking at, okay? All right, so some of the books out there to help you, additional tools, all right? Now this one, Higher Elevation, White Mountains. Unfortunately, this color guide, and we use color all the time, traffic lights, the color, okay, signals something. And even though the color in a flower is not very indicative of what kind of plant it is or species, okay, we recognize it. And so it's just handy, it's convenient, like with those colored bands, you could put the thickness on the band and all make them the same color. But then you're gonna have to read the number, all that stuff, and that's just silly. So color is effective, and this particular book about the flowers and plants in the White Mountains is obviously, like most of them, very reliant on color. Unfortunately, this one, that's all it relies on. It's more of a catalog, not really an identification guide or help, okay? All right, and I've mentioned this one before, Ann Apple's book, Plants of Arizona. This has not just color, but the arrangement of the flowers, the symmetry of the flowers, and other aspects, the leaves, etc. So this one is going to be your overall guide. Of course, it doesn't have everything in it. It's got about 400 plants. There's 4,000. So I recently came across a new plant that I learned by Lynx Lake. What's not in here? Even though that plant, the genus is Saponaria, okay, is used all along the landscape. I was at Charlotte Hall, a museum there the other day, and it's used extensively as an ornamental plant in their plantings. So it doesn't have everything. No book does, okay? I have a flash drive that uses an Excel spreadsheet, and that's what I actually use to identify that new plant. And so there's electronic guides. We have some other guides at Spring Valley Library because we are flower power, plants rule, animals drool. We have all kinds of guides and workshops to help people get more out of their hike. Arizona Highways has plenty of examples every year, and you could go through there. This is a summer issue, July, and you'll start to where oh, I know what that flower is, okay? And we are actually going to start with, we're going to include this one here, which is columbine. That's another one, okay? Very common and widespread. All right, on the cover, that's the plant we're going to start with, okay? White flowers are the only ones we're going to deal with today. We also have a number of handy guides, watercress, edible, white flowers. Okay, that's the Indian paintbrush. This is one we're going to include today, blueberry elder with cream colored flowers. All right, edible fruits, luscious. Okay, chokecherry. Anyway, there's just bunches of them. Okay, and the more you know or are familiar with, you're going to get more out of the hike, and it's going to be much more enjoyable. So that's some of the tools and the tips, family. Okay, you don't have to get bogged down in the technical aspects and so forth. Okay, and that turns a lot of people off, confuses them. They don't have training in that, so we're going to keep it very simple. Talk about 7 plants today that you'll find them frequently, and we'll talk about a couple of attributes with regard to helping you eliminate the wrong ones from the one you're looking at. Okay? All right. So, here we go. First one. And I happen to have a specimen of it here. Okay? Now, this particular plant is common. The other thing about the plants themselves is where they grow. Some plants only grow in a certain kind of place. You'll have chaparral plants, you'll have conifer plants, okay? Cacti, etc., they tend to be found in limited places. Some are rather widespread. This particular plant is an ancient plant that you will have heard about, okay? this plant, notice the purple splotches on the stem. Okay, that's one important factor. All right, the flowers. Now these flowers are tiny, but you'll notice that the flowers, the little stalks with the flowers, they all come off from a single point. And then it goes up to another point, and then a whole bunch of wands, like an umbrella, go off from there. And so that is indicative of this family. There may be other families, like the milkweeds, that will also have sometimes flowers arranged in umbels. But this one is just classic, strictly umbels, and that's your first tip. And some of you will recognize this. Queen Anne's lace, carrots, all right, so it's a hugely important family. There are some seasonings like dill, all right, that are in this family, and it is very chemically complex. So when you crush the leaves like that and smell it, they got a very strong aroma. And so when you see a flower arrangement like that, you look at the leaves, this one's divided, all right, they're alternate, so they, you have leaves that are divided, they're split up into pieces. There's ones that are simple, okay, that are all just one blade, basically. They come off the stem, alternate or opposite, all right? So just knowing a couple of those characteristics like that will help you and what to look for so that you can narrow it down, all right? And this case also the aroma, this grows in wet areas, okay? So, poison hemlock. Socrates, remember him? Okay, he had a problem with this plant. Took him out. Okay, so very toxic plant. You would never eat anything. Put your hands in your mouth after handling this thing. Okay, all right. So that is poison hemlock, wet sites. Look at that little bug right there. I'm going to give that over to Lisa. She'll use that later for a library project. Okay. So that's another point, when you're messing with some of this stuff, you're going to find other organisms that like the flowers too. Okay. All right, so poison hemlock. Next, we're going to talk about violets. Now, violets don't have a symmetry that is round. When you look at a flower face on, notice its symmetry. If you look at it like this, and you can divide it in half in any line you want, and it's equal, okay, that's sometimes called regular, radial symmetrical, or actinomorphic, like a starfish, okay? So that's pretty common. Lots of plants, hibiscus, you may think of, roses, all right, are that kind of a symmetry. Violets, though, are bilaterally symmetrical. You only cut them in half and get equal halves through one line. Okay, you cut me in half this way, the top and the bottom is not the same, okay? So that's bilateral symmetry. And violets have that bilateral symmetry. And once you probably see violets in the garden, ornamentals, some of these plants, the carrot family and all that, some very important economic contributions to food and so forth and seasonings. Some of these wildflowers you would expect are pretty much just ornamental plants, and you'll find them in gardens, and that's the case with violets. Okay, the leaves are generally alternate, simple, okay, and like I said, the flowers are bilaterally symmetrical. The other thing to note with these flowers, two things, okay, how many parts are there? Are the petals, are there 4 of them, or 5 of them, or 3 of them, or whatever? So then notice the number of parts in the big colorful flower parts, the petals. Are those petals united into a tube, like with the penstemons? And the numbers, then you will still have lobes, maybe 5 lobes, that would reflect how many petals it would have if they were separate petals. So notice if the petals are united, stuck together, and how many lobes or pieces of petals are there in the flower. Okay, so violets, again, moist areas, Grapevine Canyon, you'll see these all over the place. Other creekside areas, West Fork, up on the Mogollon Rim, places like that. Okay, violets. Third, okay, now this is a shrubby plant, a woody plant, cliff fiddler bush. Okay, now this one's in a different family called the Saxifragaceae, the saxifrages. Okay, this is similar to roses. It's closely related to them. Again, family relationships. Some family members, parents, children, brothers, sisters are closely related. Then you have more distant cousins and things like that. So plants too, genetically closely related, some further apart. There's about 1,200 species worldwide of this particular plant. Now this shrubby plant with 4 petals, which is a lot less common than the 5-petal ones, and they are separate petals. They're kind of spoon-shaped, and you'll see pictures of it there. The leaves are alternate, simple, remember, alternate, simple, radially symmetrical. So they're like the round. You cut them any way and you're going to get an equal half, okay? Usually there's 4 of them, and again, they have that spoon shape, and they're woody shrubby. So they'll be on hillsides. Could be low elevation, high elevation, but when you see one of these things, you will recognize it again. And that's part of the deal. When you go on this hike and you see this one or that one, and then the next hike you see another one, and then by the time you remember and take some pictures, you will build your database in your head of the ones that you'll recognize, and you will recognize it if you pay attention to what's on the trail. Okay, cliff fiddler bush. Next, blueberry elder. Now this particular plant is more of a cream colored, and it has a cluster of flowers, but it does not have the umbel arrangement. It's just kind of more free flow, okay? But a large cluster of flowers, very lovely fragrance, a heavy fragrance. We'll have a video of bees just swarming all over this thing. The other thing to remember about some of the plants to help you identify them is the fruit. Okay, this particular one has luscious blueberries. All those flowers develop into a bunch of berries, and they're edible, they're great. I've been warned not to eat too many at once. Whenever you're eating, you first have to know for sure what it is and use moderation. Do not eat too much of it. You may have a reaction that you don't want. Got it? Okay. So, the flowers are small. So whether they're symmetry, you're probably not going to really notice even because they're so tiny. But the collective, how the flowers are arranged makes a big difference. And there's a bunch of them. So some flowers are just single, like the violets. They're just one out there on the end of the stem, and you can just get a clear view of it. These ones that are jammed into either the umbels, sunflowers. You look at the sunflower video that we did, there's dozens and dozens of flowers crammed into just one little disc. And so the arrangement of the flowers can also be indicative as well as these other attributes, okay? And the purple fruits, and usually wet places. I have a couple of these in my yard, but there's no way I could give it enough water for it ever to produce the fruits, and that's unfortunate. When you have an edible landscape, I'm not able to eat it. But I hiked up in Grapevine Canyon, and in the 5 years I've been trying to grow this plant in my landscape, not one bit of fruit on it. I got more fruit on that one hike from these plants, Grapevine Canyon, than I did in 5 years. So sometimes you can harvest what's out there more productively, efficiently, and enjoyably out there hiking around than struggling with it in your own landscape. It just depends on what it is. All right. So the family I wanted to mention of the blueberry elder is honeysuckle family. Don't you love names like that? Honeysuckle. That's pretty cool. Even though we live in an arid wasteland that some people think that we live in, there are plants with names like honeysuckle. Okay, so that's blueberry elder. So the next one is in the same family, the honeysuckle family. Now this one though is called snowberry. Would you expect to find a plant named snowberry in Arizona? At the high elevations, you will. Now, why do they call it that? All right, common names are often descriptive, but they're not necessarily very meaningful when it comes to understanding the relationship. For example, pineapple is neither, okay? But this one, snowberry, the genus name, I know you're gonna love this, Symphoracarpus, huh? Doesn't that just gonna roll off your tongue? Stick with snowberry. Why is it called snowberry? Because the berries, which are about as big around as the tip of your finger, are pure white. Unfortunately, not considered edible. I have tasted them, but they're not really good, okay? Small leaves, this is a shrubby, undershrub plant, like in Grapevine Canyon, so it's in moist areas again. Moist areas, you'll notice, just tend to have a lot more stuff and variety and diversity, so that's where you want to concentrate your efforts to develop a better command of understanding on what's out there. You'll just see a lot more there, so it's focused, okay? So, opposite leaves, small leaves, only about as big as your thumb. Also, remember that opposite leaves is the less common characteristic. So when you find something with opposite leaves, you're a lot more likely to find it, identify it quicker, because it'll be easier because there's fewer other things to eliminate. Okay. The flowers are tubular, so the petals are stuck together. Okay, 5 little petals, little lobes there. So it's short tube, whitish. Sometimes it'll be a little tinge of pink. Okay. Not a big deal with regard to the economic value in our world. Some wine is made from some of the other species. Only about 275 species worldwide of the honeysuckle family. Okay, a couple more to go. Evening primrose. Okay, now this one, radially symmetrical, low ground covering plant. Okay, evening primrose, the genus Enothera. There's about a dozen or so species just of this one genus, because you got family, then you got genus, then you got species. Okay, 4 parts. Okay, so that's less common than the 5. That will help you. Now the name, evening primrose. Why is it called that? Again, the common name tells you something that's helpful, it's meaningful, because that's when it opens. In the cooler times of the day, you'll see it open in the morning and in the evening. Now, a lot of times these white flowered things are open at night because there's when the moths and other pollinators that are attracted to that color are more active, and so that's when it's going to be open. Otherwise, it's closed up. But this one is weird in that the fruit, the female part of it, the pistil, is inferior. That means it's below the petals, and you'll see this long tube of like a capsule, and then the petals come off. All right, so that it'll be unusual when you see it, and you'll remember it. Okay, 4 petals, mostly white. They can be a little pinkish too. And again, that tells us that color in and of itself isn't very meaningful with regard to relationships. It may be a handy guide to identify something. You know what color of traffic light to stop at, you just see the color. It doesn't say the word stop, although a stop sign might, but the lights just, you know the color and you react a lot quicker and easier, and that's why we use color. Okay, it's just handy and convenient. All right, our last white flowered mountain wildflower, okay, is Sacred Datura. All right, now this particular plant, the genus, see this is a common name, Datura. It's also called Jimson weed. Started out from Jamestown weed. It's also called thorn apple. The fruits on it are about a small apple, and they have little curved like claws coming out of it. Why it's called thorn apple. Very toxic. This particular family, the potato-tomato family, tobacco also, so hugely important with regard to products, you know, tobacco and potatoes and tomatoes, peppers, things like that. So that also tells you lots of funky chemicals characteristic in this plant. This particular plant, if you were to take those leaves and crush them, it's going to smell like death. Okay, and my daughter said, well, what does death smell like? Okay, you haven't smelled death? All right, putrefaction, rotting, corpses, roadkill. That's the smell, at least to me, of the leaves. And so, again, very strong chemicals. This particular plant is used in hallucinogenic efforts, like in the seeds and stuff. But you, like anything like that, you use it wrongly and it will kill you. So they also call it angel's trumpet because they use this big tubular, 5 petals, but it's a long tube, and so the petals are united, and it's like the angel's blowing a trumpet over your dead body. So don't mess with this thing. Sometimes around the margin of it, there's little purplish, colors and stuff like that. So that's something to look for. All right, 2 more specimens that I got that I want to just mention because white flowers, okay, when I'm not looking for specimens. So now this particular one, all right, tiny flowers again. And in Ann Apple's book, she will tell you flowers clustered, and that will help you narrow them down. All right, you're going to see another thing on this particular plant. If you look at the flowers close enough, they look like butterflies. So it's in the butterfly subgroup of the pea family. Legume fruits, hugely important. Alfalfa, peanuts, peas, beans, stuff like that. So is where this family is. So it's very important. The leaves are usually divided. This is growing everywhere. It was 6 feet tall, lining the trail there on the Prescott Circle Trail this year, bicycling through it. It's almost like a forest of these things. So tiny white flowers, butterfly shape, if you were actually to look at them close, and very fragrant. White. Sweet clover is its name. Okay, Melolotus, the genus. All right, last one. White. Okay, again, small, tiny flowers, but when you put them all together, you get a recognizable display. This is called yarrow, the genus Achillea. All right, and so fern-like, finely dissected leaves, alternate leaves. We talked about the sunflower family. This is a member of the sunflower family. So you're going to get these tiny flowers that are about 4 or 5, 6 flowers with a cluster of other tiny flowers that are 4, 5, or 6 flowers. So, but pine forest, drier sites, common, very widespread. Yarrow is the name of this, common name for this particular plant, sunflower family. All right, thank you very much. So that's Talking with Ted, mountain wildflowers, the color that is white. So we will see you next time with a different color.